or I was curious about whether their advice matched up with your instincts.
No, when I do these things, I have a tendency to put them in a form of a question,
Hmm.
and asking our listeners so as to not, unlike our media, frame the question for the answer in which I'm looking to get. I try to keep them as open ended as possible. And some of our listeners gave some really good advice. One of them came up with this is actually really good and kind of plays back to what Ed was just saying. Cameron, and I'm going to say Katia, but it's at GILLA 5490 on Twitter, said that you don't want to involve others in your fights, especially your parents.
Mm,
Good.
that is good advice. Yeah.
I thought that was good. There was another one that said never use the word divorce. Once it's said, it's an option.
Kind of a fair point.
Yes. This is a great one. Not sure this counts as love advice, but a retired Army sergeant used to tell me a kiss is an upper persuasion for a lower invasion.
I'm not sure that's really the letter of the law. A useful metaphor and probably accurate enough. But
yeah, and another one, and you can find these all in the feed on at Jim and Mickey, and also using hashtags TJams, you can find some more. Another great one was, yes, dear, you are correct, dear. I don't know what I was thinking, dear, and never go to bed angry with dear wife. I saw several happy wife, happy life responses. So, I thought it was really interesting. A lot of them involve the same things that Ed kind of referred to, if not in our own very T-Jams kind of way.
Yeah, there probably are certain universal truths, or at least observations about marriage and long-term loving relationships.
Well, that may be true, but they certainly aren't learning them from romantic comedies.
Yeah. You had observed this, that so many romantic comedies, which admittedly aren't necessarily meant as relationship guidebooks or meant to provide, aren't necessarily
labels that say that.
Aren't meant to be perfectly, role models for relationships or such. But you're right, they either end in the wedding or they end with the two people getting together and then roll credits. That's the story. And they lived happily ever after, which is a fine for a fairy tale ending. But I think, you and I have observed that. Am I crazy for thinking Hollywood just isn't that interested in married people?
No, because they do put movies out about married people. They're just terrible, awful movies. And they're generally depressing.
I was going to say, for a separate project, which I will eventually get a chance to talk about on this program at some future date.
Listen, that's called foreshadowing.
That's exactly. That's I tried to come up with action heroes who were married, and it's a very, very short list. There's Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles, the Pixar movie. John McClane in those first two Die Hard movies, and then he gets divorced. And then I just looked all around the movie spectrum, the TV dial. All the Marvel movies, all that kind of stuff. And by and large, there were a ton of widowers. CBS at one point had a good 3 or 4 separate TV shows that all featured widower heroes. And
again, it's very interesting to me because romantic comedies do not come with said warning, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And at all times, they end when the hard work really begins. One of the probably... in my opinion, one of the most, it was one of those painful almost romantic comedies. It was really good, but it hurt a little bit because you felt like you were intruding on their lives, was The Breakup.
Okay.
And it was probably the most true to life because of the way, the circumstances were not perfect. It was just something they had to do and how they got on with it. And they didn't ultimately end up getting together. And you're left kind of as a viewer, and I don't think I'm giving anything away of a 10-year-old movie, you're left as a viewer of feeling like, we're so used to the happy ending and didn't get it. But at the same time, it was such a good movie that you didn't feel leaving angry at them, because a lot of times they do tend to like to give you, the opposite of the romantic comedy is to leave you hanging.
I was going to say, I think you actually hit on something important a moment ago when you said the hard work of the relationship really begins. Mm-hmm. Hollywood either chooses not to or does not know how to make a movie about that hard part of a relationship or a marriage and make it funny and make it enjoyable. Maybe you could argue This Is 40 by Apatow a little while back was kind of the closest it's come in recent years.
This Is 40 was pretty good. I would go with the Grown Ups movies as well.
Okay, all right. It's kind of in that vein. Although it's really more about, am I crazy for saying they're more about male friendship?
Well, no, because each of them while it is about male friendship, and obviously that's the comedic part of it, each of those men have family responsibilities that they ultimately have to own up to in both movies.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned with Ed the couples retreat one, which may have been like the closest they've gotten to that. And I'm trying to remember, were all the couples in couples retreat married, or were they just been together a long time?
Well, yes. One of the couples were married and thinking about getting divorced. This was like their last hurrah. Mm-hmm. One of the couples were married and just wanted a vacation, so they went. One of the couples that went was a man who was dating a very younger woman after a bad divorce. Mm-hmm. And so each of them kind of represented a different type of relationship. And it was fascinating, I thought, actually, in the way that they played it out. I find that a lot of times Vince Vaughn and the like aren't given enough credit for putting out decent movies wrapped as comedies.
Mm. Oh, yeah. Usually there's actually a decent amount of heart in those movies. And they're very often he plays he often plays more kind of a fast-talking, wise guy, wise-ass anti-hero type. But very often his stories are about his bad character, kind of either learning a lesson, maturing a little, growing a little. And so, yeah, I kind of felt like there's a, this is one of those ways where there are a lot of people who are like, Hollywood, it's all a bunch of smut and sin and debauchery, and Lord knows there's plenty of that.
And we love them for it.
Yeah, well, there's often a little bit of a moral tale in these stories. Now, here's the thing.
Yes, absolutely.
I've had these arguments whether the Apatow movies are remembered for this journey of their characters and how they change, or whether a guy like Seth Rogen, we remember him for the way he is in the beginning of the movie. The stoner who's lazy and always in trouble and stuff like that.
Considering how many times people seem to watch these stoner comedies, I'm going to guess they get it. I do want to mention really quickly before we go into the next segment, I did get some advice just recently tweeted to me from a listener that I must share. Actually, here is the advice. Give him booty and make him breakfast.
Why can't Vermont teddy bears make one like that?
Nice.
This is one of those things where we had talked about doing a Valentine's Day show, and we did a little bit of our discussion of Valentine's Day and gifts you should get last week. This week, it's a little more focused on relationships and making them work. I kind of wish we had like multiple shows before Valentine's Day because there's so much we could chew over. But unfortunately, time is running short. We will be right back after this.
Marcia, what happened?
Peter hit me in the nose with a football. I can't go to the dance like this.
Well, I'm sure it was an accident, sweetheart.
An eye for an eye. That's what Dad always says.
I never said that, honey.
Shut up! Time to teach Peter a lesson.
Marcia, eat a Snickers.
Why?
You get a little hostile when you're hungry. Better? Better.
Marcia, Marcia, Marcia.
Jan, this isn't about you.
It never is.
Won't you stay with me? 'Cause you're all I need. This ain't perfect.
Welcome back to the Jim and Mickey Show, our kind of special pre-Valentine's Day edition. It is Valentine's Day week. People are thinking about relationships and love and all of that touchy-feely, gooey stuff that my co-host thinks that I am two hearts and flowers and romantic, as men are known to be, and women are such cynics about these sorts of things.
Again, I'm going to be the one who gets the hate mail this week. I'm okay with that, but it's not that I don't appreciate Valentine's Day, because I do, and as you know, Mr. Bias, while he's learned over the years to deliver those sunrise roses. When
he got you chocolate pie. The man definitely loves you.
Yes, I know, the chocolate pie.
And was it a vacuum cleaner or was it the hairdryer? It was a hairdryer, right?
It was a hairdryer. Dave's the one who's planning on trying the vacuum cleaner at some point. But, it is interesting because I think that and we should do another show on this because, and maybe not next week, but at some point, because relationships are such a huge part of who we are as people and how we see the world. And it's a big part of how we view movies, how we view events that happen, and even let's face it, even the way we view some news stories that are about people's personal lives. So, it's something that maybe Ed's right. Maybe we just really still aren't communicating well about sex.
There's that. I was going to say, in light of what he had said, it was a very interesting piece of advice that I developed after witnessing a couple I know divorce and thinking I knew what the problem was, and then later on hearing from them what the actual problem was. It is to learn how to fight constructively, meaning that when you have a disagreement, you can, after the hurling of the objects and the yelling and all that kind of stuff, after you've got that, one of three things can happen. There's a fourth one, but the fourth one is the problem. You can concede. Your spouse can concede. You can work out a compromise. What the fourth option, the one that's problematic, is you try to sweep it under the rug. And you try to actually not resolve the issue, because trust me, that problem is going to come back at some point. And it turns out that a couple that seemed okay on the outside, I learned found out that apparently they'd never resolved anything ever in the course of their marriage. They always just swept it under the rug.
I think that's fairly common.
Never anything.
I don't know. I don't live because I am okay. Obviously, for those of our listeners, I'm certain that you are not surprised to find out that I am someone who is not afraid of conflict. So,
I'm sorry. Carry on.
Hell, our friends just consider it foreplay. So it's one of those things where, yes, it's hard for me to understand that, but I think that every relationship really is different, and you really don't know what's going on unless you're inside of it. And I think that that's important. It's, me and the, judge not lest you be judged crowd. But there's lots of different reasons and things, and people enjoy talking about things and whatnot, but do we really communicate? And I think Ed may have nailed it like I expected him to, but just thrilled to have him on the show. Another thing I wanted to bring up, and a huge thank you to a big fan of the show and a big friend. You can find her on Twitter at Honky Tonk Jew. Her name's Amy, and she writes a blog, and she actually did a review of this show. And I have to tell you, it was fantastic. I put links up. I'll put another link up, in the sense that obviously she's a fan of the show, so I liked it. I know you're surprised there. But also, I feel like she kind of got what we're trying to do, Jim. Did you get that impression?
No, absolutely. A good review is always nice, but the one that really has you has you and I high-fiving and really has this, that sense of, okay, this is worthwhile, is when somebody doesn't just enjoy the show, but appreciates precisely what you were intending to do with it. And it's not just, you weren't just good by accident,
Right.
It was deliberate. And so thanks very much to her for those kind words. Also, we probably should mention that the last week's show, our part one of our Valentine's Day Odyssey, just taken off like crazy. Last I checked, was it 2,000 listens?
Yeah,
in a very short period of time.
Yeah, a little over 2,000, and just over the weekend. So yeah, pretty insane.
So first of all, thanks to everyone who's listening to that show, listening to this one.
Thanks to everybody who's sharing it, obviously, as well, and enjoying it. Let us know what else you want to hear.
More of this, less of that.
More of Vicky, less of Jim. More
less of Vicky interrupting Jim.
Can't get enough of Dave.
More of Dave.
More of Dave. We may, as listeners know, we don't have guests very often. Some of this is a scheduling issue. Some of this is just making sure there's room for all the topics we want to talk about. We have enjoyed all of our guests, whether it was Neil Dewing talking about cocktails and mixology, whether it was Amelia Hamilton discussing the challenges of the dating life, or Ed on marriage and marriage encounters and keeping relationships strong. So we will be doing more of this eventually, but we're artisan hosts. We only select things very carefully and bring the very best to you. You will never see a filler guest on the Jim and Mickey Show.
We don't need it, because we will do our own filler. So that is one of the reasons that we don't have to do it very often. And I just want to thank everybody who's been with us from the beginning and everybody who's joining in right now, because we are having a great time doing this. I'm Mickey White. He's Jim Geraghty. And Dave Perkins is the guy who makes us sound so good every week.
I just push the buttons and listen right along with all you guys.
This is the Jim and Mickey Show, and we'll be back next week.